Greetings, and I guess welcome to another Lessons with Odin. It has been requested of me to make another resin-ish tutorial, so I'm going to show you how I make my shaker mold charm thingies. These are a lot of fun to work with, but they are kind of a multi-day project. This is not something that you can really mass produce, so keep that in mind when you are producing these. Materials. That is incredibly subjective, depending on what you want to do, and what kind of craft you want to make. So, let's start off with a work mat. I am using a very, very well-loved / hated silicone mat. This is just like, you can get some from the craft stores, you can get some at cooking stores, but I would recommend getting them from the craft stores because you can use coupons, because these things tend to be overpriced. I also have a miniature Silpat to do like detail work, or to be able to put a piece on to kind of transfer it and move it around easily without spilling it everywhere. So these are pretty handy. Subject of tools. I've got a variety of things. I've got brushes that I put pigments on. I have these little silicone tools that I use to push resin around to make things not a very chaotic mess. I have syringes and, what are these? Dropper thingies that I use for transferring oil, or even transferring resin if it's really, really not very viscous. I have stirring tools as well as things that can also be used for little detail work. Whoa. And these scoopy thingies that I use to get a little bit of either glitter or pigment at once. Pretty much any clay tools would be good. If you have clay tools already, most likely you will have enough to do this kind of stuff. I decided that since I do this a lot nowadays, I have gone with silicone stirring tools instead of craft sticks to kind of reduce waste a little bit. Tweezers, because tweezers are generally pretty handy. Yep. I have a big-ass mixing spatula, but yeah, that's a matter of tools. Tools can be found all around you, so it's just a matter of what you want to do. I have mixing cups for whatever two-part resins that I will be working with. I have some silicone cupcake holders coming along the way, so once I've got those, I'll probably stop using disposable Dixie cups and just wash those. So, I am using two different kinds of resin, and it's up to you what you want to do. I am using this amazing cast 10-minute quick cure stuff. I don't like it for a variety of reasons. It is very, very runny, and you have very little work time with it. And it does not take pigments well because it's opaque, so you have to, like, in order to get a pastel color that you want, you would have to put a shit ton of pigment in it, and that's not good because it'll never cure. And it's also a very, very fast work time, when practically no work time. You have to basically run and gun when it comes to pouring your resin into your molds. But I do like that stuff because if I want to finish a project in a day, that's the shit I'll work with. You can use regular 2-part clear epoxy, and you won't have to use as much pigment. And then I'm also going to be using UV resin, mostly for detail work. I don't want to make a whole entire mold shaker shell out of resin. 1, because it's expensive. 2, because it literally will never cure. This stuff is kind of finicky, so I like doing it for doming, or like other repair work, or like a glue, pretty much. So I don't use too much of this UV resin in my projects, but that's a good option too. If you want to dome using regular clear epoxy, that's totally an option too. Just add an extra day to your workload. Then you will need some transparency fill. This is a pack of 100 I got on Amazon, I think for like $20, $25. Kind of pricey up the front, but this will last me forever. So I'm using a bit of this as a cover to seal up the shaker. They do make specific sized and cut out transparencies in order to fit perfectly so you don't have to cut it, but they kind of, I don't know. I don't like having a bunch of random shit and having to keep track of different things, so I just cut them myself, and just be cautious when I do it. Now onto the random fun bits. You will probably want to pigment your dye. So I've got a variety of pigments here. I've got this gel stuff from Resin Obsession, which I think I'm going to stick to because it's meant to work for resin. I just was hesitant to do it because it's, these are like $7 a pop for a bottle. But a little goes a very, very long way. It's got the consistency of, like, Wilton's, the cake gel coloring. It's got the same consistency and the same potency. Other things you can use is alcohol inks with several things in mind. Ice resin tints are really good. I got this brand from China, which is okay. Mostly for UV resin, and it should be transparent if you want to dye UV resin. The thing that I find difficult is that certain colors, like the yellows, the greens, and a light orange, does not behave well in heat or in UV light. It deteriorates, so it fades. And also when it comes to purples, purples are very, very finicky. What will happen is if you mix it around either in UV resin or in heat, it will turn like an orangey sheen, which is not very pleasant and not cute, especially if you wanted purple, which is why I bought a purple. You can also use powdered pigments in order to dye your clear resins. My technique for the shakers, I'm going to brush it on, but I am kind of in an experiment phase with it because not all pigment eyeshadows work. A lot of them turn out really sheer, and there's a lot of places where the powder doesn't cover. But I found consistency with nail powders tend to work the best. And it's just kind of experimenting which colors work and which colors don't. So you may have to experiment. You might want some Sharpies to color shit. I don't know. Some of these have like matte detailed pieces on them. Like this one had some details, so I went through it in a black Sharpie just to kind of tell you what it is, what the design is, because covered over it doesn't look like much. So I just kind of colored that in. Sometimes I'll have nail polish on hand if I want to do like painting the backs of something, or if I just want to draw little details, because the transparency film is also good to stick in there if you want to draw little things, do some nail stamping designs, and cut them out and put them in the shakers. And with that comes the fun part of the shaker inserts. So, the sky's the limit in pretty much this one as long as it fits. I've also kind of learned that there is a less is more approach. If it looks too crowded, it just isn't going to be... You're not going to see, like, the nuance of all the things that you've done to it. But, the most basic thing is glitter. There's lots of kind of glitters. You can do tinsel glitters. You have stencil sequins. You can do a lot of things from nail art. Stuff is really great. Like, these are metal slices that I got from AliExpress. AliExpress is really good because you can find, like, these glitters. You don't need a lot, so I paid, like, $2 a pop for each of these, and I'm not going to run out in a very long time. So, you only use, like, a couple of sequins per each. I've got some pearls. I've got some of these gold shapes that, again, were part of the nail art. So if you just look up AliExpress for nail art, you'll find a treasure trove of things. More glitters, more pearls. I have these really teeny tiny rhinestones, like 1.1 millimeter, and the AB finish, so it flashes a lot. And then regular standard glitter in a variety of sizes. I don't know, just do what you want with it. I even have like these iridescent flickies that look really cool submerged in whatever the liquid is. And to suspend your piece, I'm using mineral oil, which I can't wait till this is gone because I cannot stand the smell of this shit. I'm going to go get some food-grade mineral oil from Amazon that is meant for polishing butcher blocks and stuff, and that shouldn't have a smell. At least I'm hoping, because I'm going to buy a gallon of it, because it's fairly cheap. Packing tape! Packing tape is very handy in terms of any crafts, not just this. It's very good for, since a lot of your molds are very sticky and tacky, grit and cat hair tends to get on them. This is a really good, quick, easy way to clean it up. This is also very good for keeping things in place, for cleaning your nail stamper if you do stamping on your projects. And yes. And now on the subjects of molds, you're obviously going to want your shaker molds. Now, for those who don't know, shaker molds are basically going to have a very deep border edge and a slightly raised decoration of some form, and then it will just be flat on top. So when you make the casting, you will have a solid surface like this, and you will be able to shove shit in it. I like to have multiple molds on standby, even if I only want to make one shaker, only because making this kind of shit isn't very accurate, and it's hard to kind of gauge what kind of things are, like how much you're going to use, how much per shaker, and what have you. So I like to have multiple molds on standby. Alright, I think I've talked enough about materials. It's very open. I'm just giving you a lot of suggestions as to what can be done. And yes, so let's get started. And more safety tips also: do as I say, not as I do. You're probably going to want to wear gloves, because this shit's nasty. And you'll probably want some sort of mask. I know y'all have plenty these days. Just so that you don't inhale particles like the mica and the glitter, because that's not fun. The first tip I want to give you is clean up as you go. Right now, because I've had to demonstrate everything, I am surrounded by chaos, and I hate everything around me, and I want it all to go away. So, clean up after each stage. So when you're done painting your pigments on your molds, get rid of all the pigments that you're not going to be using. When you're done casting your resin, put away the resin. When you're done with all their glitters and your pigments, put that away, etc., etc. You're going to be probably waiting for a lot of things to begin with. Oh! I completely forgot one other thing in inclusions. Usually you might find small resin pieces like this to use what's called bits and filler. This is an example of what you can do. These are smaller pieces that you can fit inside your shaker molds. I have other teeny molds like this that I can work with and play with. Then I've also had fun with shrinky dinks. I've made a bunch of little charms and things. I've colored them, baked them in the oven, and I got in a variety of assortments. I actually printed these out from websites that have freebie graphics and icons that are royalty-free. So I've got a bunch of those pieces that you can include in your mold. So the first thing I want to do is brush in my pigment powders inside the mold. Now the reason why I'm doing this now is because the pigment will actually stick. If you try to do this afterwards, it's not going to stick. We're going to brush on our pigments. If you end up having to do it later on, you can use like a sealant and mix it with a sealant or a paint of some form and then brush it on, but why bother doing that if we're going to do that right now? So I'm going to do a time-lapse of my shit because this is going to take too long and I don't want to talk through a mask, so. Alright, now I have my molds properly painted, and you can kind of see the difference between some of these, how this one is like more opaque, this gold is nice and opaque. These ones are a little more on the sheer side, which is fine, and it would be greater for a dark, like a black color or something. I'm not sure how well these are going to work, but seeing is in the future. I added a flower here. I don't know why. I don't know if it's going to work, but that's what I got. And I got my resin all measured out. It's a 1 part mixy thingy. And yeah, not a lot I can tell you about that. Just follow the directions of the manufacturer of your product. I'm gonna turn these green, because I feel like it, and I think the little patina effect might be kind of cool for the golds and stuff. So I'm going to try me some green. Now with this stuff, you will probably want to mix a hell of a lot slower than I will be, or am, simply because inevitably you're going to get bubbles in this because of the fast work time, and if you stir it, it won't get enough chances. If I had more patience, I probably would also, like, let the resin sit a bit before I, pour them together and let them combine, but I am not a patient man. Now is the time for pouring. I have this bougie little pen holder thing that I can use to hold the tools that are gross and wet. The tainted tools. But anyway, we mix her up. Hopefully this is still good because it's starting to get cloudy on me. Mix until I feel like it's working. And then we go. Alright, I'm going to wait for that to cure, and in the meantime make other preparations and clean up a bunch of shit. Sprayed it with a little alcohol and rubbed all of the grime and the permanent markings off there, because I don't want that. Alright, herein comes the fun part where I add a bunch of shit inside. Once again, little goes a long way kind of mentality, and just kind of figure out, start with the biggest things first, and then go from there. So I've got a bunch of resin doohickeys here from previous attempts, and I don't know if I have anything that I'm going to want to use. I've got a black moon, that'd be kind of cool. Stick a black moon in there. Purple star thingy, I think that'll work. Flip that over. On to some other bits and bobs. Alright, so I'm going to tend to go with my larger glitters. I'm going to put a couple of these hollow stars, and there's an emphasis on hollow, which is why I love this little crack spoon thingy. I can portion out what I want easily. That's probably good enough. I've got these hollow stars, and I think I'm going to incorporate some red in there, which I think will be cute. I'm going to add some of these rhinestones because they add a glorious bit of sparkle in there. I think I need some more silver. Of these big-ass spiky things that might be kind of cool. I have this giant pentacle that might be kind of cool as a focal piece. So I think it's originally a charm. So I'm just gonna chop off the loop. Kind of square it up. And I'm going to brush everything back so it stays nice and flat there. Nice. Okay. Maybe a few of these iridescent flakes just for some dimension. Do I want chunkies? I think I want a few chunkies. Just a few. I want a few of these glow-in-the-dark stars, just to have some nice surprise. A little white iridescent. Just a tad to add a little bit. A little bit of black to kind of round things together. Maybe a little more than that, not that much. There we go. Then some micro hollow, because that's always fun. There we go. And that should be good. Remember to take a less is more, because otherwise it's just going to look too cluttered and kind of meh. Alright, now we're going to start working on sealing off this thing, and this, for me, just involves some UV resin and sealing all the insides. Like so. Make sure you don't have any of your glitters stuck to that unless you want the glitter there. Then more props to you. But can do this step with epoxy. However, just keep in mind you need to put it in a place where it will not be disturbed because it's going to take a day to cure. And such like that. Alright, you're going to tamp everything down one last time. And then smash your film right on top of it. Kind of adjust it. Some things will go on the outside, but you want to make sure that all of these surfaces are going to be sealed. You want to push it down to make sure you get resin underneath it. And yes, so you might need to rotate. Double and triple check that everything is sealed in place because you can easily futz up your design right at this phase. So, from here you either wait or you cure it in your UV light. And now it is time to dome. You can do this again with epoxy or UV depending on what you would like to do. So I'm just going to glob a bunch on and spread her around. Make sure you are covering every nook and cranny to make sure the sides are sealed. Surface tension is your best friend. Alright, and once you have domed everything appropriately, you're just going to kind of rotate it around, or rotate your vision around, just to see if there's no dimples, if everything has been coated appropriately, and then you'll either wait another day or bake it. Alright, once you have everything sealed together, it is time for the finishing results. So, I'm going to shake the piece a little bit so things just kind of get mixed together before I put the oil in. And then I'm going to take a hand drill. Yes, I forgot to tell you that you need a hand drill. I'm going to drill a hole in the back. Preferably somewhere where your clasp hardware is going to be, but with this design that's kind of difficult, so I'm just gonna figure it out as I get there. Also gonna drill on top of this because it's gooey and icky. So, just drill a little hole until you get through to the open areas like I just did. Take out some oil and a syringe, pump that shit up, and then alternatively, oh god, that is the most unpleasant thing. Then you just shove it in there. Kind of be mindful of where the needle is going in relation to it, because you're going to have leakages like this. But as long as some of it is getting in there at the same time, it's okay. Other alternative liquids you could use is saline solution, potentially alcohol, and distilled water. The thing is, you got to be careful about bacteria. So I'm hesitant to use distilled water. Yeah, there's no bacteria in it when it starts, but later down the road, who knows if things like grow inside. It's kind of gross. There are specific shaker oils that they sell on the market, but I don't know, they're kind of probably overpriced for what you get. So I do not partake in those because I'm a cheap ass. And you'll want to fill it most of the way up. You want to make sure you get the bubbles out of any extraneous appendages and make sure that gets filled up before you finish filling things up to make sure you get it to the maximum level that you want it to be. To seal this off, you can do a variety of things depending on what your final piece is going to work. So, that wasn't English, but you know what I mean. There's ways to finish this. So, I try to put whatever hanging finding I use, whether it's a bail, which is what I'm going to work with this one. I'm going to glue on a bail. With this one, I took an eye screw and went through the top and sealed that in. But to do this, I'm going to kind of flatten out the lumpy bits first so that my bail has a nice flat surface to rest on. see some oil gooshing out, so I'm going to mop that up. This part might be tricky to do with just epoxy if you glue on bales to seal this in, so you may want to just get some UV for that, or just drill from the top using this technique for epoxy, and that should be fine as long as you keep it upright where the oil doesn't flow through. I have to do it this way because this piece is so large and I put 2 bales on, so that is why I'm doing it that way. And for the hard part, I just settle my bale on, push it, and try to target the light there. While I'm holding onto it, I'm just going to kind of get my X-Acto knife out of the way because that would be very painful. But I'm going to kind of configure that, pat it down so that it stays in place. Once it's been a minute or 2, I'll let go and let it do its thing. Then, if you need to, you'll just repeat for the other side. And then finally, we dome. Now, I've got a lot of bubbles here because that's an inevitable situation from my resin that I used. It's too fast for me to catch the bubbles, and the heat gun isn't going to work with that either. So, if you want to fix that, all you got to do is do some nail polish or paint on top of it or something. You can even dome over that as well. But options are yours, and these are mine. With this, I especially like to cover the bale so that it really stays in place, and it also adds extra sealant to the oil hole that I made. Then we're back, and the final touches. Alright, and technically you will be finished and enjoy your little shaker and all the floaty bits. But, if you want to take it one step further, you can add eye screws on the bottom so you can attach charms or other dangly parts. And that is really easy to do. I'm going to add 3 to this piece, here, here, and here. I'm only going to work on that one at a time. Always work on it one at a time because things leak and it's not fun for anybody. So, pretty much the same technique as if you were adding a clasp. Gonna drill a hole. If your area is really super thick, you don't really need to add drill all the way through. In fact, you can try and drill through the pieces that aren't, like the bottom layer that isn't covered in oil, but I think I'm just going to end up through the oil anyway. Yeah, I ended up through the oil. So, work upright, stick in your eye screw, figure out what orientation you want it, and then take a little dab of resin and smear it all over the place. Try not to smear the hole, but you can either drill through that or blow through it to keep it not there. Cover that up. You kind of want to pile it up real tall right next to the hole for obvious reasons. And there. Bake it and add as many holes as you want. And then, after many trials and triumphs, you will have a completed shaker mold. Distract yourself with the shiny bits and play with it till your heart's content. So, I hope this was informative for you. I know a lot of people were requesting some more resin stuff. And I have just been obsessively making these things because I got nothing better to do with my life. So, that will do it from me. If you have any questions on resin, be sure to come and talk to us over on our Discord. We now have a Discord group, and there's a link in the description box below that'll take you there. It'll also take you to a tutorial on how to sign up for an account if you don't have one already. And there you can kind of ask questions about resin, ask questions in general about beading. We got a lovely group there that are very wholesome and look out for each other, and it's just a nice time. So, link for that is down below, and with all that being said, be sure to like up this video and subscribe if you want to see more bullshit from me. Check out all of my internet shenanigans down in the description box, and come and say hi or see a bunch of the shit that I have been working on. And I want to thank all of my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you all so much for being there and for helping to support the channel. You guys are awesome. And if you would like to get extra tutorials once per month that are not posted on the YouTube channel, check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/odins.musings. And thank you all so much for joining me, and of course, if there's anything I need to be trying out right now, feel free to let me know down below, and I will see you next time.